All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Midway Plaisance East End Improvements community meeting number 5 tonight. This is our last community meeting of 5 that we've had over the past year with you all, and we're excited to share where we're at with the design, talk about next steps, and answer any questions at the end of the presentation that you might have. A few kind of housekeeping items to run through for today. We have opportunities for you to answer any questions as needed. So we have the Q&A feature enabled. So please submit questions via chat in the Q&A, and then we'll answer those as we go through the meeting. If there are questions at the end that we didn't get to via writing, we will answer those live, and we'll have a moderated discussion. If there are any dialed in phone numbers that can't use the Q&A due to their technology situation, please raise your hand and we will unmute you so that you can participate and ask your questions there. As always, these are being recorded. So this will be recorded and posted to the Park District's website, usually within a few days after the meeting is concluded. And we will also be having a transcript of all of the questions and the answers. Those will be posted to the Park District website as well. We'll share that link at the end of the meeting. So tonight, a few things that we're going to review. We want to go over some key project milestones on where we're at with things, the feedback we received to date for community meetings number 1 through 4. We'll recap the overall site program for the proposed improvements, talk about some key design updates for the project, run through any questions and answers that we didn't get to during the meeting itself, and then talk about next steps. So where are we in the process? It's always just kind of good to center ourselves on where we've been and where we're going. But we've had 4 community meetings. Our first meeting was back in March 29th. And it was the first of, we're at the 5th one now on December 13th. Our first meeting and the third meeting and the final meeting here have been held virtually, and meetings number 2 and 4 were held live and in person at the South Shore Cultural Center. So just want to remind everyone of that. We have a few more steps left in our process that we're going to be going through over the next few months. Starting here after this next community meeting, we'll be having an IDOT and SHPO review period, probably starting in January, right after the holidays, as well as wrapping up our 100% construction documentation of the drawings for the project. So throughout our community feedback process for meetings 1 through 4, and then also the review period, there were some key themes that we heard. And I just want to kind of go through and highlight a few of these because they've been central, I think, to our overall design process as we've been going through this. I think the first one we heard loud and clear, and something that comes up more and more as we in the presentation when we talk about historic preservation, so we want to make sure that we're storing, we're preserving historical features, landscape elements, trees to the greatest degree possible within the space. We want to make sure this is an accessible space, right? Another big theme, especially a major tenet of the project, that this is safe, that it provides a sense of calmness and has this level of openness to it, that we're providing opportunities for habitat and it's wildlife friendly, opportunities for environmental education, potentially opportunities for promoting environmental stewardship, right? We know how important that is. Something that's minimal maintenance. I know that there's no such thing as no maintenance, but we don't want to put something out there though that's going to require a ton of maintenance and doesn't work. Provide this opportunity for seasonal interest, right? That can be enjoyed year round. We also don't want to have something that's going to be, a ton of noise, but we also still want to have fun. But it also wants to be nature-based and have durable materials and has active play that can be combined with passive activities, right? So it's a little bit for everyone with some of these themes that we heard during our process. In addition to the community feedback, We also wanted to talk about specific things that we heard related to program elements. So these are different things that would happen within the park space itself. And so this was collected through meetings 1 through 4, and also through written feedback submitted to the Chicago Park District Capital Project feedback form on the website, which we got some really great stuff. I think the first was restoring and preserving, the historical character defining features, right? Number one, Cheney Good Memorial Bench, right? And making sure that that is a truly essential feature and something that's to be celebrated within the park. Wanted us to consider site access and safety, think about proximity to restroom facilities, and think about that in more of a long range planning aspect. Maximize green space and openness of the space. Consider effects on habitat. We talked about considering educational value. Maybe there's some opportunities for vending in the future. We did look at that a little bit in some previous design studies that we had shared in earlier community meetings. Maintaining that north and south embankment. We do understand that the public likes to slide on that hill, and we don't want to make that any less safe or cause any issues with that. We wanted to mitigate noise. And then, right, this idea of this universally acceptable play space. And so thinking about a play space that considers a range and abilities, varying levels of efforts, different age groups, different levels of sensory between high and low within the space. In addition to that, we wanted to there were some comments we did receive related to materials. This was something that was really interesting to our design team, specifically because there's a lot of very pointed comments throughout the design process about certain materials. And so, for instance, when we talk about hardscape materials, so we talk about pavement, right? Concrete, things like that. We wanted to make sure that we were minimizing the amount of hardscape coverage on the site. One thing that we were really thrilled to hear as a design team specifically was minimizing use of plastic materials, right? That's one thing sometimes the designers, sometimes there's just way too much metal and plastic within playgrounds. And so we want to really maximize the use of these nature-based play materials. And that's something that we definitely heard in the feedback throughout this process. Not to forget bike racks, right? Make sure we consider bike racks. Same with dark sky compliant light fixtures that can complement the character. Art always should be in consideration. Opportunities for exercise equipment, litter and trash receptacles, and things of that nature. And then planting. Consider areas, for passive recreational activities. How can that planting frame those spaces? Native and pollinator friendly. We definitely heard it loud and clear, specifically about rain gardens and low-lying areas, and how can we enhance those through the use of native vegetation and bioretention areas. And I think that's something that we had reviewed at the community meeting before about some of the changes we had made relative to that. We'll talk about that here a little bit more in a minute. Minimizing tree removal. That is something that we know is extremely important to the community. And that is something that we're taking to heart, and we are minimizing tree removal within the park space. And then, restoring the use of lawn space and the opportunities for, informal programming for practice fields within the area. So how did all this come together? When we talk about this, we like to kind of talk about the overall site program. So we heard of all this feedback, and we take that feedback and we start to refine and evaluate our overall site program. And this is how we start to make sure that we're aligning the various elements and things that we're designing and including within the park, trying to figure out generally where they go and what makes sense. The underlying piece of all of this, though, which is so important, right, is making sure that we have the historically significant elements documented, and making sure that we're respecting those as we go through this process. And that's one of the things that was identified right at the beginning when we hired someone that specifically specializes in cultural landscapes, to make sure that we were identifying historic elements that were significant and that needed to be included in future designs, and making sure that this was respectful of that. So when we look at our site here with the red, we're showing the overall project limit. So that's the boundaries here as it wraps around, as you see my mouse moving over the east end of the Midway. One of the first things that we talked about and we've discovered in our research and want to make sure we reinforce was this east-west axial alignment of the Midway. This is something that's extremely important when you start thinking about how the Midway was designed and how it functions. And that starts to then transfer itself, right, to the locations of the historic tree alleys that border the north and the south ends of the Midway and start to frame those spaces. In addition to that, there were other kind of historical elements we wanted to make sure that we thought about, and at least wanted to make sure we knew where they were. The first one was we started identifying the locations of the entrances, which is really interesting when we started to overlay the historic drawings on the actual aerial photographs of the site and trying to figure out where those fell. And then also making sure we were bringing back this north-south connector path that was just east of the embankment for the railroad. And then that, which also led us to the red dot here, which is the Cheney Good Memorial, and making sure that we respected the location of that and explore opportunities to restore that, which we'll talk about later on in the presentation. So that sets the stage for all the work that we're doing, right? The historic elements and where those are. After that, we wanted to make sure we started to develop a concept framework plan, right? And this is where we start taking that historic elements plan, right? The framework plan for that, and start to identify where did some of these elements make the most sense. And so starting to illustrate this out, right? Framing the north and south ends of the Midway here at the east end by restoring that historic tree alley, right? There's gaps in that alley, right? Trees have died over time. We need to replant. We need to make sure that we're reinforcing that geometry. Whatever design that we come up with, we want to make sure that it respects that east-west axis, right? So that's something you'll see in our drawings a lot of times in these earlier ones. If we kept on drawing that line, don't forget. Figuring out how we can place this play space here in yellow so that it's balanced on either side of that axis, helping to frame the open lawn and the play space with ornamental plantings at the corner. That was another thing that we wanted to make sure that we included in future designs. And then obviously identifying some of the embankment landscape areas. And so this was our first kind of foray into developing this overall framework plan. So I think we shared maybe a committee meeting 1 or 2 before we got really heavy into the design process. And then ultimately, we really started to hit upon this idea of a universally inclusive play space. And I know that this is community meeting 5, and some of you that are here attending tonight might not have been here for meetings 1 through 4, where we really took a deep dive into what this means to us and what we're trying to achieve here. But we did want to at least hit on this for some of the newer folks that are here tonight and just explain what we mean by universally inclusive play space. We aren't going to go through the whole dissertation. You can go back and check out some of those other presentations if you're interested. But what we mean by that is that it's really a play space that's is accessible, right, from and truly inclusive for all. And I think that's something that before we get into these 3 elements below, we're not just talking, for children here. We're, this is like 2 to 80 in terms of age group accessible, right? We want to make sure that this is truly barrier free. And so what we're looking at is a space that's, free of any social or environmental barriers for people with and without impairments, allowing everyone to engage with this, right? So it's not just for someone that might be mobility impaired, but it's also for their brother and sister or their grandfather or their grandma to go to this play space with them. So it's truly inclusive for everyone. So that means that we're providing opportunities for people of all abilities to play alongside one another, right? So it's truly together. And then finally, and this is one of the things that we're most excited about, and that's why it's bolded here. We want to include some level of acceptable risk in graduated challenges for people with and without impairments. I think this is something that's really important. We don't want this playground to be something that's too static or too easily conquered, probably isn't the right word, but we want it to be challenging, right? This is how you grow and how you learn within these spaces. And so there are graduated levels of challenge and risk that we'll go through here in the design when we talk about our design concept. So all that we got to Midway Play. So here's where we're looking at with the space. What's really great about this design, we're really excited about, is it provides kind of 3 levels of acceptable risk through these series of ribbons that move in and around the play space. But I'll start here at the number 1 here, and we'll kind of work our way through kind of the highlights of some of these areas. The biggest thing is we're talking, we're going to be restoring these sidewalks, right? So we have issues with some of the pavement along the north and the south side. We're talking about restoring the mixed use trail along these areas. The north-south connector, the north-south connector pathway that we talked about wanting to respect the historical heritage stuff, right? That's not there anymore. We're bringing that back. We need to provide a north-south connection. And so that's going to be one of the defining elements. And that'll provide an accessible walkway all the way up to here to number 15, which is a restored Cheney Good Memorial, right? We're going to remove those layers of paint from over the years and do some other work, restoration work for that stone monument so that it actually looks, so close as possible to the day that it was installed. Number 3, we have our existing slide hill that's right here. So making sure that we're not really encroaching into there. We're doing maybe some minor tree removal if it's like a tree that's going to fall over, but we're not touching that area. That's staying out of our work zone. We have a series of nodes. We'll get into the design a little bit here later. We talked a little bit about sensory and how these started to lay out. So when you look at the design, you'll see it in some of these areas, like number 4, number 7, 10, 25 and 26 that are dotted throughout the landscape, a series of nodes that we're trying to work through and have folks interact and have these opportunities to work with these, right? So we have these nodes for smell, taste, sound, sight, and touch. So we want to make sure we're getting all of the senses through all these different ways, whether that's through fragrant plantings, rustling of leaves for sound, loose parts for touch, butterflies for sight, having these opportunities to incorporate pollinator gardens and things like that, right? So you have dual functioning landscapes, right? We just don't want to have it to be, oh, here's some pretty flowers. We want these pretty flowers to be there for a reason, because they're for fragrance and they help people with their sense of smell, or you have them for butterflies so they can engage people through sight. And so thinking about where those fall. So we'll get into the I think the specifics of the place-based design here in a second as we go through some of the imagery that we prepared. But as we go further to the east of the play space, we do have a large open lawn space, and so we will be doing some grading out there to make sure that we still are able to drain that space right there at number 3. But this will provide an opportunity to provide an active recreational play space, and this was something that was identified as a part of the process that we had to include within the design. So we're providing that, and that's that size of that rectangular shape. And then at number 28, we are showing a native landscape area for a space that is designed specifically for water infiltration, right? So this is an area that's going to have native plants, provide habitat opportunities, and allow the water to currently infiltrate into the space in that current low-lying area that is just east of the open lawn. So this is actually probably a good picture here to look at the overall design of the space. So this is a view looking back from, I would say, the northwest corner of the site, almost if you were just above the metro tracks, looking back to the southeast. So what you're seeing here is kind of the main play space with the lawn just beyond, and then the native landscape area just off to the edge of the paper right here. So providing this opportunity for the north-south connector pathway, the Cheney Good Memorial here, looking out over the entire play space under the tree, It's kind of the main Western defining feature, right? So this is a very kind of easy to navigate walkway that helps users get acquainted with the space and enter it on their own terms, right? Some people that might have some level of impairment might be a little nervous or might have issues. Be having that opportunity for them to see and survey and prospect and see where they might want to go and how they want to interact with it on their own terms is something that's really important when you're designing a space like this. So we have multiple avenues to be able to enter into this space, which is something that I think is really unique to the design because it provides opportunities for people to, enter in it. We talked about earlier the various difficulty levels or the challenges to the space. Along the east side, we have another pathway that really starts to connect a lot of these main features together. And so what you'll start to see, we talked about the nodes earlier, right? So we have opportunities for some nodes as it relates to taste and sound here in the center. And then we have some water over here. Those are sprinkled throughout the space. And then ultimately kind of this central feature here with a shade structure that overlooks the entire play environment. So what does this all start to look like? And these where we'll kind of go through maybe some of the changes from the last meeting and some of the feedback that we heard and kind of continued development. So number 4 up here, this is what we talked about previously, right? As kind of the universally attainable. This is the first level of design where everyone can really access it. And this is the smell node, right? So this is for fragrant plants and seeding, right? So we want to make sure that we're providing very fragrant planting here. So whether that's prairie drop seed, which is a native grass that smells like popcorn or something else, including those plants in there. So we can start to activate those senses of the various users. One of the things we've also started to look at as a design team is starting to dial in some of the material choices that we're looking at, right? Making sure that we're including natural materials, really thinking about the native plants that we're going to incorporate into the site, but also being realistic about what can be supported and maintained within these spaces and how do we prevent plants from being damaged, right? Because we all know people who go visit playgrounds in these spaces, they run everywhere. So are there opportunities or ways to protect this plant material through simple fencing or other opportunities to make sure that works together? And then the inclusion of signage, that's something that we're working through right now in terms of, it's not just rule signs that we're trying to include, right? These are signs that are going to explain to people, here's how you should interact with the space, or here's how you can explain to a caretaker, this is what this is for. This is an acceptable risk. We want someone to challenge themselves and really starting to inspire people different ways to use the play environment that we're starting to show here. Just across the way from that previous nook, the smell nook, right? We have our taste nook, right? And so this is the area for the mud kitchen. Now, obviously, we're not encouraging everyone just to go out and taste mud, but it's more of a metaphorical element, right? But so we have an opportunity to engage with water, with the soil, create different elements through loose play parts and collaboration and have a little stand. And this has always been a very popular item regardless of age or ability for kids in play spaces throughout the city and across the nation. Our next sensory nook here at number 9, this is just off to the main path right here. And this is a really cool feature that we're really excited about. This provides an opportunity to engage with a small, low climbing net that takes you actually over plant material. And the idea is that you start to hear that sound of rustling leaves, right? You've probably heard it before, right? That quaking aspen or a cottonwood, these native trees that really have a really unique sound to them. So providing those types of elements and plant material within these spaces that can really provide unique sounds that maybe someone that lives in the city might never actually get to hear within a park or within an outdoor space. And then further to the south here, just past the bike racks, we have our loose parts play. And so providing cubbies and storage areas for these loose parts and opportunities for visitors to interact and manipulate the landscape with a kind of a designated area is something that we like to use in a lot of different nature play spaces. Excuse me. And then just across the way next to that, we have our site garden, right? And so one of the things, like I mentioned earlier, is thinking about dual uses or three uses, we want to make sure that this is a truly working landscape. And so if whatever we can do to provide opportunities to provide pollinator gardens, and so spaces for bees and butterflies and things like that, it provides that visual stimuli, but also provides that much needed pollinator factor within the garden, something that we're really trying to do in all of our spaces. Excuse me. We talked a little bit earlier, but restoring the Cheney Good Memorial. This was a photo from a dedication day. And so obviously it looks much different in its current condition. And that's something that we want to rectify as soon as possible. And so that'll be a key project or a key program component of the project. And as you can see over here on the left, when you look at the plan, making sure that we're not providing a lot of elements within it that are visually obtrusive, right? We want to make sure this is a key element that is highlighted for everyone. And then finally, the gathering node. And this is an opportunity to provide accessible seating, have an area to sit and rest within the actual play space itself with shade, right? We all know how important shade is at playgrounds, but it also provides a great opportunity to interact and see what's going on in the treetop adventure course just off to here over to the right, which will have a few more images on as we move forward. Additionally, at number 14, when you start to work your way around the corner here from that treetop adventure course and that seating node, we get into this idea of a musical play node element. This is something that we're looking at. It's something simple, whether that's made of like a wood chime or something like that, and kids have the opportunity to manipulate it to create different sounds. And so we're working with an artist to figure out the design of this, but we think this could be a really neat key feature within the space. And what play space wouldn't be complete without a little bit of water? Water is something that when we look at play environments, is super important. And it's not just because it's just fun to play with, it's because of the socialization and cooperation that it affords, right? And so whether you're the child or adult or whoever at the top that's manipulating the hand pump, and then the kids that are playing with it along the way, damming the water up or doing whatever, you have to work together to fully enjoy it. It's not just a singular activity. And so this is a great spot for kids to work on socialization and working together to really fully enjoy their play environment. Number 5 at the top north end of the site. One of the things that we're really excited about, and I don't know if this photo does it justice, is this fully accessible swing. And so what you see here, you see a child here in a wheelchair. This actually swings back and forth. Apparently this little child's maybe getting pulled in 2 directions here. I'm not sure what he did, but this is a really fun opportunity to swing with someone that's able-bodied, and it provides, this is probably, I think, going to be the first one in the city. So we're really excited about the inclusion of this piece in the Park District's portfolio. And then in the center space, this is probably one of our most exciting spaces. And some of the areas we probably changed the design a decent amount from when we last talked. We heard a lot of great feedback, or not great feedback. We heard weird feedback, really strong feedback is related to the overlook structure right here. And one of the things we had heard was, that those neon colors you're including in the shade structure just don't seem to work with the historic character of the Midway and what you're really trying to do with the natural play elements, and can you consider something else? And that's one of the things that we've really started to work on. And so right now we're proposing is, something that's a little bit lighter in color. It's probably not going to be totally white, but something that's toned back with maybe some perforated metal panels, but not having those bright colors associated with that. And so that's something that we're changing here. And I think it's actually looking a lot better and working with the design really good. We're really excited about it. Additionally, we've added some other more seating areas to this along the back through the seat wall and incorporating backed benches, right? So making sure that you can get up if you're older, providing armrests for people to be able to use as well if they're maybe having issues, maybe some physical impairment issues. And then obviously this wonderful space we're looking at where we have our embankment slide and our our little wall where you can climb up and get back to the top, whether it's through using the kind of almost got the rock climbing elements, I would call it, or other areas to get up and around and really, I think, fully enjoy this bowl that we've designed here. Um, Another thing that we think is just a great thing to include that it doesn't really about traditional play at all, really, but it's just this idea of like meandering gardens, right? And this is more of trying to have a quiet space, a space where you can go and decompress. Maybe the speed and the activity and the noise of it all is just too much, providing this opportunity for some simple garden spaces along the trails that can be, used by everyone, right? This doesn't just have to be about kids. It can be maybe about a senior citizen in the neighborhood or whoever, but we think this would be a really great feature to include here within the space. I think there's only a few more slides and then we'll get to the Q&A here. Another one that we're looking at is this rumble path, and we're really excited about this. And this is something we've actually worked with a lot of accessibility experts. This is what we're talking about, one of those moderated challenges here. And this is meant to, and for, again, people of all abilities to go through, but this is something that could be gone through with a wheelchair that would be really exciting for a visitor, right? Because it provides a surface that goes up and down where mostly like a lot of accessible walkways are very simple and consistent slopes. So it offers that challenge and it offers that opportunity to play alongside someone that might be going along the balance beam course off to the side. That's the wood balance beam course. And so again, providing opportunities for people that are different, have different challenges to play together is the goal, right? And so trying to bring everyone together within these spaces. And then ultimately the one that piece that we're most excited about, and we're going through the design right now in a little bit finer detail, is this treetop adventure course. And this is where we start talking about acceptable risk, right? What can we do to challenge visitors that might want something that's maybe a little bit geared towards someone who's a little bit older, a little more able-bodied. And so providing that opportunity to get up, to prospect, to see the surrounding areas, have something that's more natural in its construction, right? So it's wood, it's not going to be something that's built out of steel or plastic, so it fits in with the surrounding landscape. But has lots of different play value associated with it. That's maybe including the climbing net, or maybe there's a small slide, but different opportunities to get up and see around and kind of be within what we call the treetops. So that's kind of the summary of where the design is. I think I tried to go through a lot of the different elements that we've furthered the design with, and some of the changes we've made since last time we had all met a couple months ago. With that, I know there's a lot of me talking here in a row here for the last 30 minutes or so. Be a good time to go through Q&A. And I think the way that we have set this up is that we have a series of questions that have been submitted. And Michael Lang, who's the project manager from the Park District, is going to help moderate this. And Heather Gleason is here as well from the Park District to help answer any questions as well as myself. So with that, Michael, do you want to start kicking this off?
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. There was a comment in the chat about what's being done for the geese who have their habitats here.
It's a good question. I think what we are doing here specifically related to habitat is we are providing that natural or native planting area further to the east. Currently, the entire area consists of turf grass. And so what we're trying to do, I think, is provide additional habitat, maybe not specifically targeted at geese, but for lots of other different migratory birds that might be stopping by, or other flora or fauna, to include within that low-lying area along the east side, which is a pretty significant size native area that's going to be included along that space.
Thank you. And I just wanted to mention that we were able to activate the raise your hand function for those people who may need to utilize that option. Second question here I guess this one is for Heather. It is about decision-making process as it relates to the site of the playground at the east end of the Midway and any alternative sites.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. This is our 5th meeting, so we've answered this, I think, at every single meeting. So the Park District's mandate through this project is to implement the federal agreement that was agreed to through the federal review process. The Midway site was selected through the UPAR designation process with the National Park Service by the city and the National Park Service. So our role here is to implement the requirements of both the MOA and the UPAR agreement. So we did not have the ability or do not have the ability to change the site. Our role here is to implement that agreement.
Additional question that was posed here, which I think it was hit on through the presentation, is how is accessibility being addressed?
Yeah, I can maybe just talk about that at just a high level. We talked about the levels of graduated risk and making sure that we're challenging everyone. But I just want to make sure I hit maybe the bare minimum technical response to this to make sure that we're all on the same page. All walkways within this site will be 5%, which is the code required, federally mandated ADA accessible code required slope, right? So we aren't going to have anything too steep on all these primary walkways. Certain play elements might challenge that to make sure that we're working towards that. And then all surfaces will be firm, stable, and slip resistant, right? So we're looking at concrete pavement to make sure that we aren't putting something out there where someone can slip. But again, like I mentioned, there will be certain elements within the playground that will start to challenge and push people's boundaries a little bit, but all the primary walkway surfaces will meet all the accessibility code guidelines. And then one thing I forgot to mention during the presentation is this element down at the bottom left. And this is something that we didn't have probably shown accurately in the last meeting. And it's that crosswalk that we're showing across the Midway, right? We want to make sure that we're providing an accessible crossing across the Midway that's close to the park so people aren't having to walk all over the place, that has bump outs, right? So that's that area where it pushes out past the on-street parking to shorten the travel distance for a user as they're crossing the street. And so that allows for someone to show up in a, let's say it's an accessible van or something else, and being able to exit to the right and then cross the street, because we are very challenged with the existing roadway network as it surrounds the space.
Thank you, Rob. I think that also addressed the question regarding accessibility when surrounded by the roadways.
Yep.
Next one is for, I think specifically for Heather. So in light of the adverse written and oral public comments and questions, can you explain the October 13th written statement to the Federal Highway Administration that the quote, "City has not encountered any problems, disputes, or objections in our efforts to carry out the terms of the MOA."
So I think that was made by the Department of Planning at the City of Chicago. I can't really speak for the Department of Planning. Obviously, all of you or many of you have been with us through these 5 meetings. And I think what Rob has really done, a lot of work in trying to show is that at every successive step during these public meetings, we've done our best to address the design comments that a lot of folks have made, trying to stay within the parameters of what is required by the federal agreements that we're under, but also making modifications as best we can to address some of the things that folks have brought up to us, such as making sure that we have safe crosswalks and our natural area to the east, which originally we just had all grass. That wasn't part of the federal requirement, but we heard very clearly from the community that you wanted a little bit of a natural area and wanted something that was a little bit more naturalistic in its approach. So those are the ways that we have tried to address those kinds of comments.
Thank you. Another design related question is where is the closest public bathroom to these play spaces?
That's a great question. I would say there's a couple things related to bathrooms that we have done and explored for this project. The first was at number 30, I believe, or four, is it 4 and 5? Just up here at the north side of the park. We have explored the opportunity to include potentially in the future a physical bathroom. That is something that right now is not currently budgeted for in this first phase of the project, but it's something that it has been explored. There is capacity from the water line and sewer and the location of utilities for that to be located there in the future. So that's one thing we wanted to look at when we were talking about this space. That space also has an opportunity for accessible restrooms. And so that's another thing that the Park District is currently exploring, is the opportunity for a portable restroom facility to be placed there. Because right now, I think the current closest public bathroom, to answer your question, is probably going to be across the street at the OPC once that opens, when this opens around a similar time frame. We also looked at opportunities, and we're coordinating with Metric because they're going through a series of station improvements here, as well as whether they could incorporate some restroom facilities. And that's, I think, still ongoing, but not necessarily, I think, looking too good. So we want to make sure that we are thinking about the future, thinking about the short term with the temp spaces, but then also we have the opportunities across the street.
Rob, I can add a little bit to
Yeah.
that too. So they're also, we call it the English Comfort Station. It's actually also in the MOA to be restored. It's one of our upcoming projects under the federal agreement. So yes, certainly anything that OPC has public will be nearby, but we are also restoring that bathroom. The other one to the west would be at our Midway ice rink house. There are opportunities potentially there. But Rob is right. I mean, our hope is that in the future that we would be able to enhance the space with further facilities. So it just was not in our budget at this particular time.
Two questions that I'm going to sort of intertwine for you, Rob, as a design sort of piece is, one is about an environmental impact report for the project. And two, can you talk about site 33 as a wetland?
Yeah. I don't think I would constitute the central lawn space right now currently as a wetland. Right now, it's a low-lying area that isn't draining properly. I would say that areas further to the east, there have been plant species, and I think there was some investigations that may have indicated that it could have been a wetland. And that's why we're starting to utilize that area to further, I'd say, enhance that area. One of the things we want to do, and as a part of the agreement, was that we also had to include, an athletic space that was playable. And so that's why we're locating that area into the center, directing the water off to the sides, and then further enhancing the east side of the site with that native vegetation. And so I think we're working within the kind of the natural way that the water is starting to move, and we want it to move to better make sure the site functions properly. So that I would say that's what I think the first part of that. The part related to an environmental impact assessment, I don't think an environmental impact assessment was produced for a playground at the Midway. We did a historical resources survey and are going through a SHPO review process for the historical elements, but not an environmental site assessment relative to impact.
Rob, I would add one more thing on your site 33 there that's labeled on the site plan. So what the federal agreement under UPAR required is that we improve drainage on the site, because there were so many areas that were low lying and flooding, and that we actually provide a 30 by 50 yard space for informal recreation, like pickup soccer and that sort of thing. So that is meeting that 33 box there that you see on the site plan is meeting one of the federal requirements.
Thanks, Heather.
Heather, I'll have you answer this one. This is specifically from a resident on 59th Street who has concerns regarding noise, especially the music node. How will we minimize the disturbance to the neighbors who are impacted that? And maybe if we could talk a little bit about park hours as well.
So actually, I think the music node might be best answered by Rob, because this came up earlier and I think we modified that element. Did we not, Rob? Do you want to explain?
Yeah, we did. I think we changed out some of the materials and some of the scale of it. At that distance across the 2 lanes of the Midway, and the vegetation that's placed and the form of the land, I don't think you'll be able to hear that over the cars, or even without the cars. It's going to be a pretty good distance for that sound to travel. And I think that's something that we've dialed in and thought pretty closely about, relative to the noise of that element.
Okay, and then I'm double checking, but I believe that our we're not changing our park hours as part of this. I believe that this park closes at 9 o'clock. We will double check that and put it back in the chat, but there's no proposal to change hours or make it like a longer time frame or anything as part of this proposal.
Thank you. Another question here. Will this project break ground before funding is identified and committed?
So I would say no to that. I know a lot of folks have asked us about funding, and we are absolutely working on that with the city. It is not unusual for the park district to design something and then also continue to seek funding. That happens quite a bit. We work with communities and try to get a sense of what they're looking for. So certainly we will have more of that information. My sense would be that once we have a more formal plan, we can update our website and let folks know that way. But yeah, I mean, typically we don't break ground and move forward with construction until we have all the funding in hand in order to be able to do that.
Thank you, Heather. And while you were speaking, I confirmed the park hours for the Midway Plaisance is from 6 a.m. till 9 p.m.
Terrific. Thanks, Michael.
Heather, can you provide details about the Park District's review process with the Illinois State Historic Preservation Office to date about this project?
I can do the best I can. That is also a very formal process under the MOA that we have to submit through the required distribution process that's outlined in the MOA. So initially we send it to, I believe it's IDOT and CDOT as they are parties to this agreement, and then it gets distributed to the SHPO. But essentially what we would do is send the documentation that you're seeing here to the State Historic Preservation Office. They have an opportunity to review it. I believe, let me pull up the MOA language. I believe we are not allowed to construct anything on the site until we receive written concurrence from the Illinois SHPO that the final design for the replacement recreation meets the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. So that is sort of the next step in this process is for SHPO to review this and then give us their comments. And hopefully if they agree that we have met all the requirements, giving us that letter.
Thank you. This is a design question for you, Rob. At the last meeting, there were specific comments about the central grass area being planted with a low growing non-mow native grass. Is that still the plan?
That's actually a really good question. We've been meeting, I think, quite regularly with the CBD natural areas team to specifically figure out what types of plant species we'll be planting out there that they're adept at maintaining. And so we've gone through a pretty extensive review process for the native area at number 28. We have discussed this idea of utilizing that sedge mix or that kind of walkable mix in other areas relative to the grass lawn. I would think we would still want some level of combination of regular turf grass as well for number 33, where we are showing kind of that playable field, because if we want that informal practice space, we need something that's a little bit more in line with that. So good question. I don't know if that's fully been finalized. I think that's something that's going to be coming to fruition here over the next few weeks, month or so, as we work our way to the end of the project.
So as a follow-up to that, can you explain how drainage will happen with this? With the wetland properly restored, there should be no need for drainage.
Yeah, that is still part of the issue of why we're doing this, right? The area does not drain properly as it is, even with the wetland, right? There are some issues of standing water and water that takes too long to drain. So essentially I'll just draw this right here because I think it's easy enough. We're going to be pushing the water and raising the center of the space and essentially directing the water to the corners and to this space. This will allow the water to infiltrate within this native area. But in addition to that, we're also talking about, we're also having a series of under drains, which are pipes that are underground that have little holes in them, and the water, as it kind of infiltrates, if it doesn't percolate all the way down through the ground, and let's say it's sitting there, it has the opportunity to enter those pipes, and then that will ultimately work its way out to the city sewer system. So it's kind of a belt and suspenders approach. We're trying to infiltrate as much water as possible and do things through the natural processes, right? Because we're down here by the Midway, we're on a sand seam for most of these areas. This area drains historically very well, except for this minor section of this east end of the Midway Plaisance. So we're kind of doing a double duty system to make sure that we have as much drainage as possible.
Thank you. I think this is I'm sort of mend two questions, comments here together. One about the MOA specifically requiring play equipment to be added. And then two, why is a universally accessible play space an asset to our community?
How do you want to handle that one, Heather? I can.
Yeah, I
be
was
part
going to
of
say,
it.
sorry, Michael, I don't know if you directed that too. So I will talk first about the play space. So the MOA and the UPAR both call for playground structures, both nature play and inclusive play facilities on the west of the site. It goes into a little bit more detail in some of these areas, but that is something that is called for in the MOA. The idea of an inclusive play site is one that is really important to the park district. For one, as many of you might know, we actually were the founders in Chicago of Special Olympics. So making sure that we are providing spaces for people of all different abilities is really important to us. And for the community, I think it's also that anyone can use this space. So if you happen to be, a grandparent who has a grandchild who wants to go, play on this play space, this playground, as Rob has described a lot of these elements, is intended really so that you can play alongside your grandchild, or you can find a nice quiet place to sit and watch them play. There's a lot of different opportunities for people to play together. And this is also a really big trend in park and rec design of late. So many of you have probably, seen these playgrounds around the country or heard of them, that are designing a lot of these sensory rooms or sensory play spaces, things that we're trying to appeal to a broader group of people than maybe just your standard play equipment. So for many years, and we have folks inside the park district, even staff who will tell stories about how they, if they're in a wheelchair, they weren't able to play at the playground with their siblings because they just couldn't navigate their wheelchair through spaces. And so this way, if you happen to have someone with a disability in a family, the siblings can play together because of the way that this playground has been designed. It is intended that you have moments where you are together. You might not be able to do exactly all the same activities, but you can still be together in the space and have an accessible path. So I think there was a lot of intentionality in how the design came together to make sure that we were considering those moments. And we did actually have our disability policy office in the park district review these documents with site design and make sure that we were including elements that everyone could use.
Thank you. A real quick question for you, Rob. will you be able to highlight the location of water and drinking fountains to be included in the site?
Yes. So mark this in blue, and Sophia, I'm gonna need you to yell out to where that drinking fountain goes because I always lose it. But we do have water here, where I'm highlighting here at number 20. So this is the water feature element. There is a drinking fountain that I believe is located just nearby there as well. And so we do have a drinking fountain located within this, as well as a few quick couplers for maintenance. So yes, we do have water in a couple of different locations.
Yeah, that's correct. It's also an ADA accessible fountain.
Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you, Rob. Rob, would you also be able to sort of explain the process or what revolves around the removal of a wetland or wetland mitigation and how that is achieved?
I can try, but I'm probably going to do you a disservice on that. It was my understanding that the impacts of the wetlands were already been previously mitigated out here. Is that correct, Heather?
Yeah, and that was actually done as part of the overall federal review process. It was not done by the Park District. I believe it was the city purchased wetland credits. So certainly we can get more information. One thing I would also refer everyone to, the city has a really great website that lists all the different actions under the federal review. They have links to all the different documents, all the different analysis that went into creating the federal review documents. So if you go to the city's webpage, it's under DPD, the Department of Planning's website, and search for Jackson Park improvements. Their whole list will come up, and it has a bunch of different links on it. But yes, I believe that was a credit that was purchased by CNET.
Yeah.
Thank you, Heather. And I just searched that, and you can find it at jacksonparkimprovements.org is the website for that. Real good question. I don't know that anybody has ever asked this one before, is will there be an AED on site?
I'll defer to Heather. I've not
Yeah,
heard that
that's an
question
interesting
before.
question. Thank you for that question. I'm going to take that back and ask our in-house team. It probably would behoove us to have something like that on site, but I don't know what our standard is for that. So thank you for the question. We will absolutely look into that. And, you know, to the extent that we make a change, we'll post it on our website. But certainly, you know, that is a consideration that we should take into account. So thank you for your question.
Another question is sort of as it relates to access. How can seniors be more physically active or exercise in this space?
It's a great question. I think hopefully they're out there enjoying the space with a relative or a friend or a youngster or someone that can really benefit from it. So I think that's one, is using it with others, maybe chasing around a grandkid. I think without that use, I think there's another opportunities relative to potentially walking along that rumble path we talked about earlier, maybe even testing themselves on that very low balance beam as it walks through the space. There's probably a couple other opportunities through there. There's also, I think, that low hill element as well, but I guess it's not. It's meant to be enjoyed by all, but I would not say it's 100% designed and focused towards active seniors. It's more as a companion design piece. But I think those would be the first few that come up to the top of my head. I also think that they could enjoy the open lawn as well through any active recreational uses you might have within an open lawn space as well.
Thank you, Rob. And Heather, I think this one's a question for you as it relates to park programming. Are there programs for special needs, especially with regard to access to washrooms here at the facility?
So I'm not quite sure I understand the question. So certainly our programming staff will take care of the space like they do any other. But with respect, obviously, we don't have washrooms planned in the site currently, though Rob has, we did ask site to help us in terms of, you know, if we can find some additional funding, if we can find a way to do this, how would we incorporate them into the program? And they've given us a couple of options to do so. So that's certainly something that we can ask our staff. Some of the more creative, I would say, I know a lot of people have a certain image of portable restrooms. I would say that the design world has come a long way from a lot of the ones that you might be thinking of. They actually do design fully accessible portable bathrooms. So even if we don't, you know, have the money to do that, that's certainly something that we can look into, because I think, you know, that there are a lot more options today than there used to be in the past.
A question regarding parking. Is there any parking provided with this project? And if so, where will people park and how will they access?
Thanks, Michael. So there's no parking planned on this site, but there is public parking directly across the street from here to the south. And that is partly also why, as Rob was explaining the crosswalk, we did talk with the city, with the Chicago Department of Transportation, to think about how we can make the site better accessible, not just for people with disabilities, but for anyone who might be coming to the space. And so those were some of the things that that we were able to negotiate with them to make access a little easier.
Sorry, I'm trying to digest a clarification to the drainage question. So if the wetland is properly restored, there should be no need for drainage. So no water should be heading into the sewer systems from this block. So why the need for the additional piping? Why can we not just replant the wetland with water loving, water absorbing plants?
So maybe I'll try to answer that a little bit clearer this time. So the east end of the site will be planted with water loving plants. And our intention and everything that we hope will happen is that that water will infiltrate into the ground and be absorbed by those water loving plants. And that we will not need to provide any sort of physical infrastructure. However, in past projects, we've had issues where there might be long-standing water, or you have a very large-scale rain event in a very quick manner that not necessarily all that water can infiltrate that fast. And so to make sure that we can still provide a usable and playable area for number 3, which is outlined in the MOA, we wanted to make sure that we provide some level of physical drainage in there. Not saying that all that water is getting directed there, it's really just there as a backup plan to that drainage strategy.
So Heather, there's a number of questions sort of scattered throughout that relate to the overall site selection and alternative sites that may have been developed or planned.
Okay.
As relates to the UPAR, would you be able to talk a little bit about how the site selection for this happened?
I'll do the best I can, but I've answered this a couple times in many of these meetings. The Park District did not select this site. We were asked if there were different types of recreation that we could provide here. And our obligation, again, under the federal agreement, is to implement the MOA. So that is all I can say about this. Again, the Park District, the Chicago Park District, was asked about this space, the east panel of the Midway, and what we could place on it from a recreational standpoint. We did provide a couple of ideas in terms of active and passive recreation, and the federal agencies chose this combination along with the city, I believe, of different play elements. And so that is why I keep repeating over and over that the Park District's obligation is to implement what is put into the federal review package.
Thank you. I think a few more questions. Maybe this one as it relates to design, Rob.
Mhm.
What efforts are being made to keep existing trees rather than clear cutting them? And how many old trees will be removed as part of this project?
That's a great question. One thing that we do as design professionals, right, we have arborists on staff at our design firm is evaluate all of the trees on site prior to any construction activity or design activity, frankly. And when we design spaces, we make sure not to place elements and structures and anything that could damage tree roots in what we call the critical root zone. So we go out and we identify what those critical root zones are and avoid putting elements of it. So that's one thing that we do not to damage or impact existing trees that are out there. Obviously, we'll go out and we'll determine if any trees need to be selectively pruned and making sure that there aren't any like dangerous branches or things that might fall over, potentially impact someone. So that's another thing that we'll take a look at. We will identify areas for tree protection fencing and a tree protection approach. That's something that the Park District is very good about enforcing and has very strong requirements and all the documentations on how to protect trees that are existing. And so we'll go through all those things and essentially establish a course of action for the contractor to take to make sure that the health of those trees is not impacted during construction. There will be a couple trees that have to be removed just due to safety or just overall health of the tree out there. I want to say it's like 3 to 6 trees that are out there that are just on their last legs and just need to come down just from a straight up arborist best practices. This is not that we're trying to cut down a tree because it's just in the wrong spot for the playground. I mean, this is just a safety and a tree health issue. And so that will happen with those, but we are planting, I would say well over, if you look at our plan here, just on the right of way for the Midway alone, at least well over a dozen trees there, and we'll have probably another dozen or so or more within the park. So hopefully that answers your questions about trees. And if there's any other questions, please shoot us an email through the website. And
Thank you, Rob. One other question is, how would you see this play space as being an asset to children with special needs from neighborhood schools?
I guess I can answer that. I think this, in my opinion, this is an asset to kids from from schools surrounding the area. It's an opportunity for them to go play in a space that's truly designed for them. A lot of other spaces, a lot of playgrounds at schools, even at all different types of schools, they're not really designed inclusively or with that thinking in mind or that student in mind or that child in mind. And it really is a shame. I think this is an opportunity to provide a space where they can feel welcome, they can feel challenged, they can grow, they can interact with others, and all an environment that's designed for that, and not just a standard metal and plastic playground sitting on a patch of asphalt outside of school, right? That's not the right environment. I think we all can recognize that. And so I think this will truly be an asset for those students.
Great. And I think one more question, I think that relates to the remaining of the slides that have yet to be presented, but what is the overall schedule for design and construction?
We'll get into a little bit more detail on schedule here in a second, but overall, the idea is that construction will begin in the spring of 2023, and it will be complete in the spring of 2024.
So another question about equity and service. Does the park district have neighborhoods that are underserved by parks and would benefit from such a universally accessible park?
Thanks for the question. Yes, we actually hope that this is just the first of its kind. We certainly have ADA accessible playgrounds, but this is definitely unique where we've really looked at all the different sensory elements and trying to combine these elements into one playground. So we don't have the funding or plans necessarily for that just yet, but we really do hope that this is something that we can replicate if it's successful in some of our other neighborhoods that may need park space or near our special recreation programs. That certainly I could see that certainly in the future. And yeah, that would be something that I think we would like to do.
While Michael's looking for the next question, I'll just add to that, Heather. I think what's important about this is that, you know, these design principles and design elements that we're talking about and implementing in this park in the future will become part of just the basic design process for every playground, right? This is something that designers will be thinking about that they need to include in all sorts of play spaces moving forward. And it's not just one here, one there. You know, this is something to become a standard for everything.
So I think as I've sort of gone through and scrolled through these, I think we've tried to gather as many of the comments together. I don't feel that there have been comments that we haven't already addressed someplace else. Um,
All right, then if that's the case, I can move into next steps, Michael. I think the one thing we did want to at least touch on, or just make sure we remind everyone, is that, you know, we have all these comments in writing, right? We've seen them all. We'll have them documented and you will get response. If we did miss a comment and it wasn't responded to, after we've gone back and reviewed everything, we'll make sure to provide a written response on the website, as well as the other questions that have been provided to make sure that there's a record. And obviously the presentation will be posted as well with the full video. So with that, we'll go into next steps here. As always, there are still opportunities to provide feedback. So if you go to the Future Capital Projects websites for the Chicago Park District, I think maybe Sophia, you could drop the link in the chat for everyone. But you can drop an email. This is also where you'll see the previous meetings, the recordings, any other and all presentation materials related to this playground improvement project. And then for next steps, we're down here in the bottom here in this bolded section of community meeting number 5, showing that we're at December 13th. We are planning our SHPO review and first quarter of 2023, as well as the LPO review. Looking to start permitting in the bidding process in the first quarter as well. And then the idea is that construction starts generally in the second quarter. So, you know, late spring, once the weather breaks, and everyone's favorite season starts, construction in Chicago. And the idea is that we're complete in Q2 of 2024. Realistically, construction probably won't take a full 12 months, but there are things that will need to be handled in terms of punch lists and a couple other things and plant establishment. So I want to make sure we leave ourselves enough time so that we can satisfy the requirements of the MOA. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up. I don't know, Heather or Michael, if you have any closing thoughts before we break.
Sorry, there's always one person who can't get off mute. It seems like we're having a little bit of trouble figuring out who raised their hands. I believe that Michael, the people
Oh,
who
I'm
raised
sorry.
their, yeah, that's okay. The people who raised their hands, I believe, actually got their questions answered because Michael was reading them.
Okay,
But there are 4 people in the participants who raised their hands to ask a question. So I think go ahead, and if, I don't know how to do that, Sophia, if you know how to open the mic or,
Yep. I can let Mary go first.
okay.
Hey Heather, it's Mary Lou Seidel with Preservation Chicago. I know I keep asking the question and you say you've answered it, but you haven't. Who can we get the list from? Because throughout this process, we have been told that there were alternate sites considered and they were eliminated. Now I have FOIA'd your department, I have FOIA'd the Department of Buildings, I have FOIA'd the Department of Planning, and no one will give me that list. And you can say we're just doing what the MOA tells us to do, but why can't anybody produce this list? Because this park is incredible, the designs you have, except for draining a wetland, which you can call a low-lying area that holds water, that is a wetland. But it has historically been a wetland. It was tried to turn into a park, and wetlands like to be what they are, wetlands, and you can build and engineer it all you want. But I really want to see the list of
So
all.
Mary Lou, can I answer?
Sure.
So
Maybe.
I know that you
hope.
keep, yeah, well, I'm going to answer what I've been saying, which is the Park District, the Chicago Park District does not have a list of alternative sites. I can't speak for the other parties involved. We were not completely involved in every negotiation that went on in the federal review. So you can keep asking for something that we don't have, but we were given the Midway site and asked for some alternative recreation ideas, which we did provide to DPD when they were talking about it. There was, in fact, we had some things that I didn't think would work at the site, like a baseball diamond, which I thought would fly out into traffic, and other things. I mean, we had shown a couple different recreation options, and they, in their negotiations with some of the federal agencies, this is the group that came back. So I'm sorry that you're not getting what you're asking for, but I'm also, I think I've clearly stated from the beginning, because people have been asking me since we started these meetings this year, that that's not something that the Park District can provide. All right, I don't know who else, looks like
Looks like Kenneth Newman.
Ken Newman. Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Can you hear me now?
Yep,
yes, sir.
What? This is weird. Oh, hold on.
We hear you, Ken.
yep, we could hear you. Except now it looks like you might have muted yourself again, Ken, because we can't hear.
Yeah.
Try unmuting one more time.
Hello?
Yep, we gotcha. Now you can talk.
Hello?
Can you hear us,
Hello?
Ken? Okay,
Can you hear me?
yes. Oh, okay,
Sophia, maybe we
maybe he
can send him
can't
a
hear
note.
us. Yeah,
Yeah, so the next one is Mark Lipinski.
okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Mark, we can hear you.
Thank you. One comment I'd like to make is that while there may be a memorandum of agreement that is not something that's carved in stone, it can be amended. The Park District also can respectfully decline to perform what it's asked to do under that memorandum. Memorandums of agreement do get amended. The SHPO website has copies of amendments to memoranda of agreement. So it's not like the fact that the memorandum of agreement does not foreclose making any changes. That's an avenue that is open to the Park District.
Okay, Mark, thank you for your comment.
I believe those were the only people with their hands raised.
Did Ken ever submit a question or did that not? I don't know if he wants to write it instead of,
We sent him a note to ask him to email it to
yeah,
us or drop it in the
okay.
chat.
It seems like there's always one person that for whatever reason, it just doesn't want to work.
That's usually me, so.
Nothing personal,
But
Ken.
there is a good question in here. I think as it relates to the timeline here, what is SHPO review and LPO review?
Hi.
Oh,
Do you want me
yeah,
to
go
handle that
ahead,
one?
Ken. Yeah, either one.
Okay, I'll do it. My name's not Ken, I'm Rob.
Sorry.
Sorry, this is designer speak too much. We always abbreviate everything. SHPO is the State Historic Preservation Office. So that's what we affectionately refer to as the SHPO. So that's what that is. And so that's our historical review process. And then LPO is the Lakefront Protection Ordinance. Due to the project's location, it has to go through a special series of city review that's called the Lakefront Protection Ordinance. So that is what we'll be doing in Q1 of 2023. All right. If that's it, we are approaching the end time. So I just want to thank everyone for all of the thoughtful engagement over the past since March, actually. I would say, at least from a design team, from us, me and Sophia and the rest of the folks at Site Design Group, this has been a really awesome project and really excited to work this through and see it come to fruition. And hopefully we'll see you all out there in a year or so at an opening. So with that, we're going to end the community meeting. Keep an eye out for it on the website. And again, if you have any questions or anything else, please feel free to submit them to the CPD website.
Thank you, everyone.